So I had a really unique experience because my sister-in-law, my brother's wife, her parents actually lived there at the time. They were working for the United States government and working in the embassy. And so they heard that I was coming, and they're not members. So they're at the airport when I arrive in Praia, and they have this sign and they want to take me out to lunch. And they meet my mission president, and he's like, yeah, you can go. And he let me go have lunch with them. I've only seen them a few times in my life, but, we have the common bond of my sister-in-law. And it was just really fun. And my mission president said that whenever I'm in the capital city, Praia, that I could visit them and teach them a little. And I made do on that a couple times. And it was good for them to see what life as a missionary is like and what the church does with that. And so that was a really nice welcoming party. And besides that, I felt really at home, actually. I wasn't in culture shock at all. But I think that's also because I've lived overseas before in third world countries. And so it just sort of seemed familiar. I'm like, oh, lots of cars, dogs in the streets. Like, I'm just like, hey, I'm home. That's probably not normal for most people, but I'd say, like, if there is culture shock, just like remember these people are just like you, they have families, they have cares, they want to have peace, and then it helps you like open up and love them a lot more. For my very first area, I was sent to the furthest flung island in all of Cape Verde, and it's also the smallest island. So there's only 3,000 people on the island of Brava, and in the main little village city, there's only like 1,000 people. And so I'd see the same people every day, and they call Brava the island of flowers. And it's just so lush and green, and at night there's this mist that falls over the town. It's sort of eerie but beautiful at the same time, and it was just really cool because there's only 4 sisters on that island. There's no elders, there's no more than 4 missionaries, and we got to know people really, really well, and it was just beautiful. I think it was like the most amazing way to start my mission. Just the climate, the geography, the buildings, which are like, they look like Europe, but there's all these African people around you, It's so cool. I love the Cape Verdean culture so much. Cape Verde is an archipelago, or like a string of 10 islands off the west coast of Africa. So if you go to like the westernmost tip of Africa, about 400 miles to the west into the Atlantic Ocean are these tiny islands. And so it's in the middle of nowhere, and sometimes planes and boats stop there to refuel. But other than that, it's just sort of no man's land in terms of everything, But the Portuguese settled there, and so they brought Catholicism with them, and they brought Africans there too, and so those cultures just sort of blended. And so everyone there is Christian. The only people I met that weren't Christian were, a few Muslims that came from Africa and a few like atheists or Protestants that came from Europe. But like overwhelmingly, like just Catholic or Christian, The mission has been its own mission. First of all, it was part of the Portugal South mission for a long time, but it's been its own mission for at least 15 years, if I'm right. Or maybe like 10 years. And it was just sort of creeping along for a while. And my first mission president, President Oliveira, while I was under his direction for the first 9 months of my mission, we went from having no stakes to 3 stakes. And then when my second and the current mission president, President Matthews, came in, we organized the 4th, and I think there's a 5th that's being organized soon too. So just enormous growth, just an explosion just within the last few years. And I got to see a lot of that, and it was just miraculous. It was amazing. The faith of the people there is incredible, and I just saw so many miracles. It was so great. So in my first area, it was just a branch because Brava is so small, but we'd have like on average like 60 to 80 people. So still pretty small. We'd meet in like this old house. And my second area, Mayo, the church had only been there for 3 months when I got there. And and I was one of the first sisters to open it, and it was just crazy. Like, everyone was an investigator, you know? When I got there, I think there were like 10 members. Mayo was very Catholic. It's like they made the plaza of the main city, like, around the Catholic cathedral. And it's very interesting. But I love how devout and faithful everyone is. Cultures differ a lot from island to island. Even the language differs from island to island. So Portuguese is the official national language, but they have this thing that they call Creole, which is like a Portuguese African blend. And the northern islands have one sort of dialect that differs from island to island, and the southern islands have one that differs from island to island. So you can sort of tell where somebody's from by the way they talk, sort of like America, you know, different accents, different words a little bit. It's super interesting and also really hard to get used to. Every time I'd be transferred, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to learn this new way of speaking, but it never took long. It was really fun. The word of wisdom is not too bad. I feel like a lot of people don't smoke as much as you might expect just because it's expensive and they know it's bad. A lot of people drink, but it's not too hard most of the time to get them to commit to stop. There is some alcoholism issues, but that's like any other culture. But in terms of the law of chastity and getting married, super hard, because almost without exception in Cape Verde, the people that are married are people that have been really devout in the Catholic Church. And so it's almost impossible to find people that are already married. And when you do, you get all excited, and then you find out they're super, super devout in another religion, and you're like, The struggle, I think, is mostly with money, with getting married, because it's sort of expensive to get married, and they're convinced that you have to have like a huge party, and so that's something that hangs them up sometimes. But I was able to witness one family of mine that we taught get married, and it was awesome because so many of the members chipped in and helped, and it was a really modest affair, but just super, super fun. So yeah, it's hard, but don't get discouraged because the gospel is about families, so it's the most important thing. Besides that, there's a few doctrinal things, like people definitely believe in the Trinity. They don't believe in like a God that has like a body. They believe like, oh, God's within me, so I don't need to go to church. Like, I have God in my heart, and I can just worship in my home. And, you know, like, a lot of people think that way. It's pretty normal. So it's pretty hard to convince them that, yeah, we need church so that we can help other people, so we can learn from the Spirit, we can take the sacrament, all those things. Just getting them to commit at all. They're sort of a really, like, relaxed culture, and so they don't always feel that sense of urgency. So it's really important to like be urgent and also like really believe in them. Like believe in them, and like it says in Preach My Gospel, if they don't follow through, be super disappointed, almost devastated, because they need to know that they're missing something so, so important. And they've never heard of anything like that before, and so it's going to take some getting used to. But if you're consistent with teaching them in that way, then yeah, they'll progress. So as I said, I started in Brava, which is the smallest island. It's the southern westernmost island. And then from there, I went to Mayo, which was like newly opened. And that's the southern easternmost island. And then from there, I served 6 months in each area. From there, I went to Sal, which is the northern easternmost island. And Sal it's like the tourist attraction of like all of Cabo Verde, because it has a city called Santa Maria, which is like right on the beach, and just like the most perfect white sandy beaches. You can imagine how tempting that was as a missionary. Like, oh, so tantalizing! I can't even touch it. But every once in a while we'd get to go there, and it was just beautiful, so very beautiful. But there was a lot more commerce in Sal. I'd say the main trade of Brava was like cattlery and like gardening. Mayo was like carpentry and fishing. And Saul was like commerce and tourism. And yeah, super interesting. They're all just so different, but yeah, I loved it. So that also differs from island to island. It's super interesting. Everything from the climate to the crime to commerce, everything. So Brava, crime didn't even exist. Like, I didn't even hear of one thing. I heard of like one fight that happened once, and people were like, and everyone knew about it with like in an hour. It was crazy. So Brava, just the safest area ever. But if you go to like the big cities, for instance, the capital city, Praia, or São Felipe in Fogo, or São Vicente, Mindelo, then you're going to have some problems. But generally, I know that the president is very sensible and he wants to put people in safe areas. So we have some rules like, yeah, don't go to certain areas after dark, something like that. And we've been able to be really safe. If you are worried about crime, then don't bring your camera with you proselyting, because it's common that things could get swiped or something. I don't know, just be smart with your stuff. Just be careful. I'm not a paranoid person, so I probably wasn't as careful as I could have been. But I ended up being okay, so it was fine. Our houses are really nice, actually. They always get really nice houses. There's no carpet. It's always tile on the ground. But one of my houses, the one I had in Mayo, actually had an air conditioner. None of the other houses I'd been to had air conditioning. And so that's something you have to live with. You have to get used to fans. Especially in the summer, it gets super, super hot. I was like in the coldest area for winter and the hottest for summer. And luckily, the hottest for summer was the house I had air conditioning. Otherwise, I would have died. Because it's hot and it's really humid because it's an island. But, you know, the funny thing is, it's not as humid as you might think, because it's sort of a desert climate because of the winds that come off of Africa. Anyway, prepare for extreme weather. Prepare for really hot stuff. So don't bring heavy clothes, bring lighter clothes, and probably try different types of garments that are easier and stuff. The people are always really friendly. They expect you to greet them in the streets, and so do so, because a lot of people remember you if you do or if you don't. Sometimes they're like, you never say hi to me in the street, and you're like, sorry, you know? So especially as missionaries too, be sure to do that, because everyone loves to do that. Wildlife is like non-existent. You'd think Africa, like, oh, there must be like tigers or actually lions. No, like the most ferocious animal in Cape Verde is a dog. Like, they just have stray dogs. The only animals there, they don't even have snakes. There are no snakes. It's crazy. Like, there's no animals that can actually harm you. So, like, don't be afraid. Yeah, they just have donkeys. They have cows, a lot of cows and dogs and cats. And the history, like I said, is, you know, the Portuguese came down. And so that's why they all speak Portuguese and have that Christian base. They're really family oriented and they love cooking. Like, I feel like for women that don't work, like half of their day is spent cooking. They wake up, they cook breakfast, and then they clean up breakfast, and then they start cooking lunch, and then they eat lunch, and they clean up lunch, and the same with dinner. It's wonderful, and a lot of their foods are just really, really good. There's the national dish is something called cachupa, or cachupa. It's like I don't know how to explain it. It's sort of like a stew, I guess, with anything. You can throw anything into it, basically, but the base is this special kind of corn that they just let simmer and soak for a really, really long time. So it's just really nice and chewy and really, really good. They make a lot of fish. So in terms of like professions, you can find a lot of fishermen, a lot of carpenters too. There's a lot of people that make really nice woodwork. A lot of seamstresses. Yeah, a lot of like fruit vendors on the street, like everywhere. You can buy food off the street. You can buy any type of fruit. it's just so fun. That was one of the things I missed most, is just so many people on the street, and you can just meet people all the time. It's like impossible not to find someone to teach. And that can also pose difficulty too, because you see people all the time, and your inventory of people to teach can go from 0 to 100 in one day, but then they fall off really quickly because some of them just don't progress. And so it's important to not just like let your inventory go down and down and down and down and down and then like spike, because you just should keep it consistent and keep it focused on helping people progress. They're just lovely people, so friendly. And so, I mean, you're never going to have, not like other missions where you have to search for people to teach all the time. It's like they fall out of the sky. Like, that's a huge blessing about that mission, but it is harder to keep them. And so you have to be really diligent. You have to make sure that they know your expectations right from the get-go. Something that I relied a lot on was in Preach My Gospel, there's the how to begin teaching points. People need to know your relationship to them right off, because they're going to be enchanted with your white face. And I say that, but it's true, like, because they're very intrigued by foreigners, and they think we have a lot of money. And so I'm not saying that's always the case, but a lot of them, they're confused as to why we're there. Sometimes they just think we're there to be nice and talk about the Word of God, which is true, but we need to make it clear to them that we're there to bless their life and to help them change it. And if you're pretty clear about that from the get-go, then you can see pretty quick who's going to progress and who's not, and you can move on. And moving on doesn't mean you're giving up on them. You can always remember them, and also, write in your area book. I have to admit, I wasn't the best at that, but I found it really helpful when people did it before, because we were able to find people, and they were more ready than they were before to accept the truth, and we had a lot of success that way. So people are so ready to serve you or help you in like any way, or give you things. Like, there was one day, it was insane, but like me and my companion called it free day, and everyone just like gave us stuff like all day. I don't know if it was like a holiday or something, but like we left the house with like just our normal stuff in our backpacks, and at the end of the day, we had like 6 cobs of corn, we had like a shirt, we had like all these different little things that people had given us, like a lettuce, a head of lettuce. Like, it's so cool. The people are just so giving. They have so little, but they give so much. They're also just a beautiful people. Like, just like, there's sometimes where I was just like looking at them, and I'm like, they are just so like, I don't know. It's maybe it's their mixed race and their mixed cultures that just make them really beautiful, and they're very diverse as well. So you find a lot of people that look like they're just straight African, and a lot of people that look like they're even European, like they have skin tone like me and blue eyes, but they're raised like anyone else, and it's just usually because they're closer to the Portuguese side, like they have a parent or a grandparent that's from Portugal. And the interesting thing is there are sort of classes, and a lot of the time the fairer you are, the more successful you tend to be. I don't know if that's because people treat you different, or you act differently, or you're just raised a different way, but that's something that's really interesting to get used to. And but the important thing is just to love everyone, because everyone is just so beautiful and so nice. And that's something I just really love about the culture, is they adopt you, and especially if you do your best to just relate with them, learn the language, learn the culture, and appreciate like their families, then they'll totally reciprocate without exception. So I love and miss Cape Verdean food so much. The funny thing is, you never would think this, but so the national dish is kashupa, but that's hardly the most common dish. You hardly ever find that, like, usually that's like if you're going to someone's house and like they're making it with their family, because it's just a big dish. The most common dish in Cape Verde is grilled chicken, rice, and French fries. So, and with the French fries, they give you ketchup and mayonnaise, so you can make your own fry sauce. It's just super funny. So like without exception, whatever island, wherever you go, there's always that plate, like the traditional plate of grilled chicken, French fries, and rice. And so get used to a lot of carbs, get used to a lot of bread. The bread, they always make it, there's no such thing as like day old bread. It's always made fresh. So good. There's like bakeries everywhere. Get used to a lot of bread and rice and beans and fish and chicken. Pretty much that constitutes like your whole life. But it's so good. I love it. And a lot of fruit. The fruit is always just so beautiful and fresh, and yeah, I love that. If the rules are the same as when I left, then it's generally discouraged to eat with members. They don't like you to do it just because sometimes people get sick. I never got sick on a mission, but that's not an excuse to break rules. So if there's a rule not to eat with members, then don't do it. But yeah, you can make some of the same things, or you could go to restaurants, and it's really nice. Actually, in my last area, we had this deal with one of the local restaurants that we'd pay them a certain amount a month, and it was a discounted amount, and we'd go there every day for lunch, and it was super good. We ate the best that I ever ate on my mission, and it was really good to have that security. You know, we didn't have to worry about always buying stuff and worrying if we had enough money at the end of the month, because you have to budget really well on your mission. There's a lot of really fun little cookies they have there and stuff that I miss, and juice, stuff like that. I love the food. There was no food that I didn't like. It was so good. Yeah. So technically in our mission, we're not supposed to speak Creole, in that we're not supposed to teach in Creole. We're not, because the scriptures are in Portuguese, you know, all the church material is in Portuguese, and so we should try to help people learn Portuguese if they don't already know it. And so Creole can be a tool toward helping them learn Portuguese and help them practice it. But in terms of like teaching solely in Portuguese, it's sort of like a crutch, and then they're detached from the church itself. I ran into that problem a lot in my second area, Mayo, because there's a lot of uneducated people there. Usually you find that like anyone over like 60 or anyone under 10 doesn't really know Portuguese enough because they haven't been to enough school. You should always try to speak with them in Portuguese so that they can understand more and more as you go along. But I just love, Creole is just one of those little pet things that everyone in the mission loves. So I want to give you an example really quick. So in my 3 areas, there's 3 different ways to say things. So how about, how are you? In Praia, you'd say, maneira que está. Okay, so in Portuguese, you'd be like, como está? And in Brava, you'd say, maneira que está. And then in Mayo, you'd say, moco está. And in Sal, you'd say, mane que buta. Mane que buta. And it's so funny and so different, but I loved it. It was just super fun, and people think it's a hoot when you just say 1 or 2 things, you know. I would say don't devote too much time to it because it can get distracting, but learn enough that you can understand people, because there's some people that can understand Portuguese, but they can't speak it. And so like it's normal that like in lessons you'll be teaching in Portuguese, they understand everything, but they can't speak it back to you. And so if you learn enough Creole to like understand what their needs are, understand if they have questions, then that'll help a lot. And yeah, it's really cool. I mentioned before that some people can be hung up on like, oh, you're American. I think that's compounded a little bit more with the sisters. Well, I would say that because that was my experience. I'm not exactly sure how it is for the elders. I know that some elders did have problems with women coming onto them, but our mission president would say, sisters, you have a special light in your eyes, and people it pulls them in, it draws them in, which is good because you can point that to Christ, but you have to be careful because there's some people that are confused by it. And without a doubt, it's hard in the mission sometimes because you'd receive unwanted attention, but as long as you kept clear boundaries and you obeyed the rules in terms of don't go teach a single male without like a woman accompanying you. And also just be careful with your relationships with people in the church and out. So even in the church, you have to be careful. Make sure that everyone knows that you're devoted to the Lord and that you're going to be obedient. Because sometimes being nice can come off as sort of flirtatious, and it can cause problems. And so you just, even if you have to say so verbally, like, in my second area, there was a member, he really, really liked me, and to the point where there was one day where he surprised me and my companion, and he, like, proposed to me, essentially, and it was really, really awkward, and so I just had to sort of really make sure he knew, I am a sister, I'm devoted to the Lord, I can't do that, I really appreciate that you respect me and you care for me, but the best way to channel that is to just serve the Lord. And so things like that will happen, without a doubt, in the mission. Uncomfortable things will happen, but if you're being obedient, and don't be afraid to talk to your leaders, your district leader, zone leader, or your president if you're feeling like there's a threat anywhere, because sometimes that could happen too. Luckily, mine never got to that level, but don't be afraid to talk with them about it, because they're not going to get mad at you. It's not your fault. But if necessary, they could transfer you, or they could talk with that person. So it's nothing to worry about. There was never any assault or anything in my mission. It's a pretty safe mission, but there's still sometimes those moments where, it can get uncomfortable. And I'm sure that's echoed all across the world for sisters. So yeah, just be careful and just be happy and be good. Yeah. I mentioned before that you want to wear like lighter clothes. Make sure that those aren't like transparent. So like this is like a pretty light shirt, but it's not transparent. So things like that are really good. That way, like, you can get a breeze and stuff. But the problem is, if you have skirts like that, then, you have issues of it blowing around in the wind. Something that a few of my companions and I did is we sewed rocks into the bottom of our skirts. So the skirt is still really like flowy and light, but it doesn't fly where you don't want it to. So yeah, it's actually pretty easy. So just get a couple pebbles or whatever, and just if you have a little sewing kit, or even just like tape for a day, you just tape them in. There was one day I didn't have time to get rocks, and so I just taped our keys. Like, it's just funny because some of the areas are really, really windy, super windy, like unbelievably windy. So it's problematic sometimes, but yeah, it's a fun little tidbit there. So there was a family we were teaching, and one day when we were there was a young woman that came in, and they said, oh, this is our great niece or whatever, and she lives just down the road. And so we marked to go see her another day. And so we go there the other day, and her twin sister are there. And so we start teaching the restoration. And for anyone that's familiar with the restoration pamphlet, there's a page about the Book of Mormon that shows Christ's visit to the Americas. And he has his arms outstretched like this, and there are people worshiping and praying at his feet. And when we showed that image to these girls, their faces lit up, and they're like, we have that picture. And we're like, what? How? And we were just thinking like, oh, maybe a few years ago some elders gave them the same pamphlet and they've seen it before or something. And they're like, no, we have it on our wall. And we're like, what? Are you serious? And now we're thinking like, okay, they got a pamphlet, they tore the picture out and like taped it to the wall or something. And they're like, no, come on, come see, come upstairs with us. And they're pulling us up the stairs, and we're coming up, we have no idea what to expect. But as we reach the top of the landing, we see in front of us the whole wall, like 15 feet square, like the size of this wall, is painted a lifelike replica of that painting, hand painted. And we just stand there, we're just absolutely dumbfounded, awestruck. We're just like, what are we seeing? How is this happening? And we both just like start crying. We're like, first of all, I've never seen that painting in someone's house before, first of all. Second of all, I've never seen it hand painted. And the only other building I can think of I've ever seen it in is the temple. And so it was just a very sacred experience for me to see that. And basically we ended up asking them how in the world they have this picture of Jesus Christ in the Americas on their wall. And they said that indeed several years ago, the missionaries had dropped a pamphlet at their house, and their dad was leafing through it, and he just became so enamored with that picture, and it spoke to him. And to the point where when they got their new house, he paid someone to paint a life-size mural on the wall. And you can just imagine how elated we were about that. And when we got home, we had to record a video about it. We're just like, we can never forget this miracle. God loves this family, you know, and we just loved that family so much, and we kept teaching them, and just amazing. I know that the Lord can speak to people through the Spirit. I know that miracles happen, and man, I will always revert to that. And I got a picture with my companion that day of that mural, and have it up on my wall to remind me that the Lord is conscious of everyone. He speaks to us through the Spirit, and that this is His true church. In my first area, there was sort of just like this token drunk man on the island. He wasn't dangerous or anything. In fact, he was very friendly, almost too friendly sometimes. And so one time we were just walking across the street, my companion and I, and we see this guy coming toward us, and we just think, you know, he's walking toward me and he's looking at me, and I'm thinking he's probably going to veer off. But as he gets closer, he just opens up his arms and just like gives me this huge bear hug, and I'm like, ah! I do. And my companion is 4'10", like this tiny little blonde thing, and she's like, oh no, you don't. she like pulls him off of me, and he's just like, la la la. It was the funniest thing. We were laughing about that for so long, and I'm just like, what just happened? That was super hilarious. Not dangerous, but sort of crazy and funny. It was in my last area. We were just walking along the street, and this woman called out to us in American English. She's like, hey sisters, how you doing? We're like, what? Like, super strange to find someone that speaks English and like an American there. And her name was Kelly, and she was super friendly. She was raised Cape Verdean, but she had also grown up in the States, in Boston. And so she was back and working on one of the islands, Saul. Anyway, so it was right around Christmas time that we met her. She wasn't too entirely interested in learning the gospel, but she wanted to be our friends. And so we're like, okay, maybe we could get our feet in the door, and teach her from there. And it was on Christmas Eve that we went over to her house that she said we could. And she was frantically trying to get Christmas Eve dinner ready for her and some friends. And she's like, sisters, I hate to ask you this, but can you help me? And we're like, of course, yeah. And so while we were there, we just seized the opportunity to try to share the gospel with her, which was super interesting because we're skinning potatoes and peeling carrots and everything. And you'd think that most people would just sort of let it be and just make chit chat. But I learned that if you have an opportunity, take it. And so she said, so what is it that you guys believe anyway? And we're like, ding, ding, ding. And we started talking about the restoration and how we believe that, you know, the Lord's church is again on the earth because it was restored by a prophet. And the conversation naturally went to Joseph Smith, and it was an amazing and somewhat funny experience. I felt very strongly that I needed to recite the first vision to her word for word. and we're over the sink like peeling potatoes and stuff, and I'm just like, how am I going to do this? And so I just put it down, and I just like turned toward her, and I looked her straight in the face and told her what Joseph Smith said about his experience. And as I was speaking, I saw her face sort of cloud over and her eyes tear up, and at the end she said, wow, I have chills. And for me, that was just such a testament to the power of the restoration, the power of Joseph Smith's testimony. And in that moment, I'm like, this truth is true everywhere. It's true. And she was able to feel that even in such a hurried environment, in such a casual environment. And from then on, I tried to be as diligent as I could, and in just showing the sacred nature of the restoration, and especially the first vision. That was an incredible experience for me. Squid, probably. Squid and octopus. So that was actually freshly caught, that squid. In my second area, Mayo, I mentioned that there's a lot of fishermen. Almost everyone, if they're not a fisherman, they're like a carpenter. And we had a family we were teaching, and he would bring stuff back from the sea every afternoon, and sometimes he'd have us try it. And so he just, grilled up some squid, and we had that, and octopus too. It was fun. It was never anything too crazy, but yeah. And in my first area, same area, Brava, there's crazy mountains. And so sometimes to get up to your area, you have to just do these crazy hikes, like sheer rock face. And like a lot of the time when it was really misty, I'm like, I'm going to die. Any second I'm going to fall off this cliff and die. But it ended up being okay, like it's just super interesting. Like the climate and everything was so interesting. Yeah. While I was on my mission, there's an island called Fogo, which is a volcano, essentially, and it erupted while I was there. So that was pretty cool. It wasn't, like, insane, like the whole world shook or whatever, but there was actually, like, the city most by it was completely wiped out. But people were evacuated, so nobody died. Nobody was hurt, but there was a lot of, like, damage that was done. And that's the most fertile land where they, like, have all the mangoes and everything, so that took a toll a little bit, but that was pretty crazy. It gets really hot, like I said, beastly hot sometimes. And for tropical islands, you would think that it would rain more, but there was only one huge thunderstorm, like my whole mission, like one day that like actually downpoured. And there were a couple other days, like in the summer, the late summer, my second summer, that it like would drizzle sometimes. There'd be like some thunder, lightning, but I'm like, dude, rain, like come on, because it's so hot. But yeah, I'd say like it was just crazy, like unreal. It rained less than it rains in Arizona, where I'm from. So I'm like, what kind of desert is this? It's crazy. But yeah. I feel like a lot of skills were like accentuated a lot. Like for example, like singing. So I've always been really into singing, but that was used like all the time on my mission, like everywhere. Like in every branch I would like be the chorister, or they'd ask me to sing something. So that helped a lot to keep it up. I was afraid that I'd lose some on the mission. And now I'm in a BYU choir, so that's cool. Another thing was working with children, like especially in my second area, Mayo, the church was so new, just like a few months old when I got there, that it wasn't really fully organized yet. So the sisters, we helped teach primary, and it was just super fun. Like I learned a lot about how the church treats primary, and which I never really knew before. It's been a while since I've been in primary, so that was another really cool thing. Another thing that I was able to work on and get better at is just talking with everyone and just learning everyone's story and loving people. That's something I was sort of raised to do. My mom always told me, everyone has a story and don't be afraid to talk to strangers, which is sort of unorthodox, but I've had so many enriching experiences because of that, and it helped me a lot on the mission. And as I was there, it's just like, it was amazing. Like people just open up to you so much when you show that you care and that you want to know about them. So my first area I mentioned, there's only 4 sisters on that island, 'cause it's super small. And we were the only missionaries. And at one point, my trainer, she was what they call the sister training leader at the time. And the way the mission works is you take either a boat or a plane between islands. And Brava's so small that it doesn't have an airport. So you have to take a boat to Fogo and then a plane to Praia on the main island. And it takes like 2 days each way. And she would stay in Praia for like the monthly leadership council for like a day. And so whenever she needed to go to monthly leadership council, she was gone for like the whole week. And I'm just this greenie. And I'm like, what do I do? And every day I'd have to go on divisions with members. And it was super, super stressful. But I learned, I'm like, the Lord qualifies his servants. He helps us do hard things. And it wasn't the language. That wasn't the problem. It was just like teaching in general and just having to be a leader, because the members didn't really know how to be missionaries. And so I had to just take on the role of trainer, or, just pretend I knew what I was doing. And I survived, luckily. And yeah, it was good. That faith brings miracles. That seems sort of self-explanatory, and we hear it a lot, but it's so true. The Lord doesn't give miracles out for free. He wants us to show that we really have faith in him. And time again, as we were contacting people in the street, or as we were just trying hard to listen to the Spirit, we saw crazy, amazing miracles happen. Don't doubt the Lord, and don't doubt yourself. A lot of missionaries can just feel so burdened and so inadequate a lot of the time that they're like, oh, I can't do this. But if you do that, then you're doubting the Lord too, because he called you. And just don't let that doubt get your faith down, because when you have faith, like, anything is possible. I swear. It's awesome. For not wanting to sound conceited, the language was the least of my problems. But I say that because the Lord just really, really blessed me. I feel like I know the gift of tongues is a real thing. And I think because I sort of grew up in hearing Spanish my whole life, and I also listened to the Portuguese Book of Mormon over the summer before I reported to the MTC, I didn't really have problems with the language. Okay, so I had problems with a lot of other stuff, and that's why I think the Lord gave me the language, and I dealt with other stuff. But I think I heard more English mistakes as done by people that don't speak English than Portuguese mistakes by people who don't speak Portuguese. So I had a Brazilian companion, my last companion, and she was trying so hard to learn English, so hard. And one day she had a cold, and she's like, "Sister, I need some toilet paper. My nurse is sick." My nurse is sick. And I'm like, yeah, okay, all right. There were things like that all the time, and just super funny. But you just got to take them in stride and correct them nicely, because then people get sort of annoyed. So, yeah. First off, I want to say that the mission was probably the best blessing I've had in my life up till now. I know that the Lord truly does call his Spirit, his children, to serve in his kingdom, and he calls them by revelation to a true prophet. I know that Thomas S. Monson has all the keys that he needs in order to speak for the Lord, and that he did indeed receive revelation and his apostles on this call, and that it's the place you need to be. I know that Cape Verde was a very special place for me, and I wish I could go back. I miss it a lot. I know that by faith, miracles can happen. And I saw that time and time again, and that's sort of my mantra in life, because I know that it's true. The Lord has promised that when we are diligent and obedient and we have faith, that all things will work together for our good. I know that the gospel of Jesus Christ was restored by the prophet Joseph Smith, and I know that the priesthood has been restored to the earth. I know that through this priesthood that we can see families sealed together for eternity, and only in this church can we see that happen. We need to, with urgency and with love, tell everyone around us about it and show it in our countenance. We need to show them that this truly is the most amazing blessing that we've received, that this is the true gospel, and that they can be happy, and that as they follow the commandments of God, they will see such an enrichment in their life as they've never known before. I saw that in the lives of people on the street, in investigators, that everyone in this earth is looking for some sort of peace. And as missionaries, that's our job, to publish peace. We can bring joy to people as we walk. Even if you don't have the chance to speak with everyone and to teach everyone, as you walk and you smile and you show that you just have great love for life, they can see it. And I saw a lot of times on my mission when people said, "Oh no, the missionaries never talk to me, but I see you all the time and you just seem so happy, so I'm excited to talk to you." Don't underestimate how much the Lord trusts you and how much He's given you. I know that He truly blesses missionaries with extra spiritual strength, extra physical strength even, and mental strength. The mission is the hardest thing you're probably going to have to do so far in your life, and it was definitely the hardest thing for me, but I wouldn't change any day of it. I know that you might make mistakes as a missionary. You might not always be in tune with the Spirit. You might not always study like you should or get up when you should. But I know that as you try your very best and as you do your best to be obedient and be an example to others, those blessings will come. I am a living testimony that if you follow what your mission president says, you're not going to go wrong. I know that. He's inspired. Your mission president is completely inspired to know you and your needs and what the mission needs overall. So please trust him and trust yourself. Remember that you've been called by the Lord and that He will qualify you and He will strengthen you. I know that without a doubt, and I'm thankful that I get to live by that every day. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
When we arrived, we were a group of 12 missionaries. There was 8 sisters and 4 elders. And even though we had just done like an 8-hour overnight flight, when we arrived, we were pumped. We were all so excited. And we get off the plane, and I was really surprised because it kind of looked like Arizona because it was summertime. And so it was just very dry, very arid. And we land on this tiny little island, and it's actually the capital, so it was really exciting when we got there. We were all just full of energy. We were excited for the mission president to come and pick us up. And I remember that night we had to go and buy a bag so I could, move some of my luggage around. And I was just walking around the city wide-eyed, and it's very poor country. There's lots of dogs in the streets, and there's lots of noise and taxis and people, especially women, selling fruit and kids everywhere. And I was just like, what am I doing? Like, this is crazy. But that was kind of the start of it. And so it just kind of went off from there. In Cape Verde, first missionaries arrived there in 1989. It originally was part of the Portugal-Lisbon mission, and like I said, those missionaries arrived in 1989, and they started spreading the gospel there. There was a few people baptized. I think by late 1989. There was about 25 converts. And then in 1990, the missionaries had to leave. There were some visa issues. And then it was again later in 1990, the missionaries were able to return. And so during this whole time, it's the Portugal mission. And they're coming from Portugal. Like, they could get transferred to the islands of Cabo Verde. And then some years later, quite a few years later, it was made its own mission. And so Cabo Verde, the whole mission encompasses the 10 islands, and 9 of the islands are inhabited. There's one island that doesn't have any people living on it. And at this point, there's missionaries on all of the islands. There's about 500,000 people in the country. And right now, I think there's about 10,000 or a little over 10,000 members of the church. So in just, a little over 20 years, the church has grown a lot. There's 3 stakes and a district, and I don't know how many branches and wards, but it's grown quite a lot. It's been pretty amazing in the past about 24, 25 years, how much the church has grown. So it's a pretty safe bet. Wherever you are in Cabo Verde, it's going to be extremely hot. That country is really toasty the majority of the year. They say that they have 3 seasons there. They have the hot season, they have a rainy season, and then they have the windy season. And there are a couple months of the year where it really is windy, like all the time. It's kind of interesting. And then hopefully you'll have a rainy season that lasts a couple of months. If they don't have very much rain, it really affects their crops and their ability to have a lot of food. And then the rest of the year it's just hot and really humid. And every day it was hot. I remember riding home to my family and just saying, if you're wondering what I'm doing right now, like I'm probably just sweating because it's so hot. Like, but it's a little different on each island. But pretty much everywhere when you go out to a proselyte, your area is not very big, so transportation is just on foot. We would only take a taxi or a bus if we were going, to a baptism and on the weekend, or if we needed to go to a zone conference, things like that. We could take a bus to get to like another city on the same island. So yeah, everything's just by foot. And we as sisters always wore what we called chacos, those hiking sandals, and those were great for Cabo Verde. And I just recommend to any sister who's going there, make sure you get a good pair of chacos, because you're going to wear them every single day. It's not really clean always. A lot of times you won't be walking on paved. Most islands don't have paved roads. There'll be little kind of cobblestones, but it's like rough, broken rock. So I don't know if cobblestone's the right word for it, but a lot of times you'll be walking on dirt and like dirt roads, or some islands you'll walk on sand a lot because it's not dirt, it's all sand, the whole island. And so that was kind of fun. I remember we would joke around that we were on the beach, but we were really like in between 2 city blocks, and there's just like sand as the road. So it's an interesting place. Pretty much everyone there lives in apartment buildings. They're very simple. They're just made out of cinder blocks. And inside they'll be very simple as well, usually just tile floors, and our missionary apartments were like that as well. And there are some people there that do live in poorer circumstances, and there'll be some areas where you'll see they kind of have little shacks built out of aluminum or plastic or wood, like things they can put together. But the majority of houses there are all cinder block, and they're just simple. A lot of people live in a 1-room house or 2 rooms with their whole family, and they'll have a small area where they can cook, and they'll have their bed and their TV and everything just in 1 room. And that's kind of what we experienced when we would visit people's houses. A lot of times you're all sitting right in there, and it's it was very nice in the sense that it was easy to just be focused with that person while you're there teaching, and have like the member there. There wasn't a lot of things going on. And so it was kind of nice in that sense. On the other hand, sometimes people did live in apartments where there was lots of people around. And so in those cases, it was a little more difficult to teach. But so there, they don't really have, they obviously don't have Walmart. They just have kind of like little shops you're going to call loja. And they're really small. It's literally just 1 room. Usually all the walls will be covered in shelves, and there'll be a little desk by the front door. So you walk in, you grab anything that you want, and then you just purchase it before you leave. And sometimes those little stores don't have everything, so you have to stop at a couple different stores to get what you want. And on the street is where you usually want to buy like your produce or your fish, things like that. And there'll just be women walking around, and they'll have like a big bowl on top of their head. And whether it has fruit in it or fish, they'll kind of walk the streets, and they'll like yell what they're selling, so that if someone's in the house, they can come outside and buy it from them. And I remember I was on the island of Sal at the time, and I really wanted to make a ceviche with fresh tuna. And so this kid comes by, and he has a wheelbarrow, just a wheelbarrow you could get at a home improvement store. And he's selling fish, and so I ask him what he's selling, and there's a piece of cardboard on top of the wheelbarrow. So he takes the piece of cardboard off, and I see there's just a big piece of fish in there, a big piece of tuna. And we kind of negotiate the price a little bit, and it's very cheap there. But yeah, he pulled the knife out of the wheelbarrow. He put the fish up on top of the cardboard. He like cut me off like 2 pounds or 3 pounds, and he put it inside of a grocery bag. And that's how you would buy fish. You just buy it right off the street like that. And it was so fresh, like literally had been caught that morning. And there's lots of fishermen there. And then they bring in the fish, and then usually women will sell it on the street. And they'll just have different kinds of fish, and it was always so tasty. There are 10 islands in the country. One of them is not habited, and it's called Santa Lucia. But the other islands that are habitated are São Vicente, Sant Antão, Sal, Boa Vista, Praia, or Santiago is the real name. There's Maio, and there's Fogo, and there's Brava, and I think that's all of them. I don't know if that was 10 though. And then Santa Lucia as well. But within those 10 islands, they're all very small. You know, the biggest island could fit inside of Utah Valley, the whole island. And there were small islands that were, you know, maybe 5 or 10 miles across at some point, and would only have, you know, 6,000 people, 10,000 people, things like that. And so all the islands are they're very different, and they vary a lot. So it's really neat. So on the various islands, they're very diverse in their landscape. When you're on the main island of Praia, it's if you're in the capital, there are like some hills and things like where the city is, but then especially when you go like more out in like the country, I guess you could call it, it gets really mountainous. And your proselyting areas, you could be like walking up and down hills. There was an area that I was in, and if you've ever done a hike that has like a switchback on it, that was what we were walking on every day, and it was a very steep incline, and it was basically like hiking. And so that was very different compared to the island I was just prior at, which is completely flat and only has sand on it and beaches, and you know, our area was just flat completely. And so it really varies. You'll get to experience a lot of different things. If you're on the volcanic island, it's also very mountainous there. There's other tourist islands that are also very flat and sandy, and some islands are really green and have a lot of plants, and other ones are just like a desert. And so it's really interesting. You can serve on an island for a couple months, and when you get transferred, you'll have a small flight of 15 or 20 minutes to another island, and you'll just be in like a completely different atmosphere in terms of what the surroundings are like and things like that. So it's really fun. In Cabo Verde, their diet is very simple. That country, like I said, it's very kind of arid in most places. Only during the rainy season they can get like a lot of crops. And so they eat a lot of rice, a lot of beans, a lot of corn. They have like 100 different recipes to use corn for. And they eat lots of fish. Fish and chicken are probably two of their main proteins. They don't get very much beef. And the fish there are spectacular. I would take any and every opportunity I could get to eat fish. You know, they have so many different varieties that we don't get here in the States. And they cook it very simply, just, you know, with some simple vegetables, tomatoes, onions, and they'll kind of cook that all together, and it's called caldo de peixe. And then they serve that with rice, and that's a very common Capo Verdean meal. They could eat that several times a week, and it would be normal. Usually with some beans as well. But yeah, the fish there is really great. But their food, it's not very distinct in any ways. You know, it's not particularly spicy or sweet. It's just very simple, very healthy in the fact that it doesn't go through any treatments, any processes. It's grown. You could do a service project like helping someone like pick beans, and then they'll like make dinner for you with what you just picked, you know. So it was good health there. They also eat a lot of ramen noodles, oddly enough. So that's a good little treat. The official mission language is Portuguese. All of your materials will be in Portuguese. You'll learn Portuguese in MTC, and that's what you'll speak and study every single day. People there do speak Portuguese, but it's like their second language. They don't learn Portuguese until they go to school. And their first language is Creole, and it was developed just when that country was being colonized. The slaves, they kind of created this language that was a mixture between Portuguese and French and Spanish and African languages. So a good way that I usually describe it is I just say it's kind of like Portuguese but with no rules. So if you've ever learned a Romantic language, you know there's lots of different tenses and things like that, but Creole is very simple. You won't focus on learning it in your mission, but you'll just pick it up because you'll hear people speaking it on the street, especially things like that. And depending on which island you're on, people either speak with a different accent or there's two different kinds of Creole. And it's really fun because sometimes even within Cabo Verdeans, one from like a really southern island will be speaking to someone from like a northern island and they'll have a hard time like understanding each other because the Creole like varies that much. A simple example, in Portuguese, to just ask someone like, how are you? You just like, como você está? But when you're going to say it in the Creole, like the Badio Creole, you say, mori que busta. So you can see it has some similarities, but it's just slightly different. And then there's the Sampa Judu Creole as well. And I don't know that one quite as much because I didn't serve there as long in those islands as spoke it. But they have lots of little phrases that they will always say in Creole. When you knock on the door, they'll just be like, "Ños entra," and that just means like come in. And a lot of times they won't even check who's at the door. That's another example of how open they are. Or if you're a stranger, you've never talked to them before, you're just trying to contact that person, they'd be like, "Oh, ños entra," I'd be like, "Come in," and then they like get to know you once you're already like in their house and stuff. And they're always surprised, like, if we understood Creole. They would be speaking, and sometimes they would stop and be like, "Are you understanding what I'm saying, sister?" And you're like, "Yeah, I'm understanding. It's okay, you know." But at the beginning of the mission, I was a little frustrated because I couldn't understand the Creole. But if you can understand Portuguese, you'll definitely understand Creole. It is almost just like a simplified version. So it's a fun language. It's always fun to hear the Cabo Verdeans in their Creole. When I think of Cabo Verdeans, probably two of the first things that come to my mind are happy and open. You could talk to anyone on the street. We had no problem at all contacting people. They would often say, "Yeah, you know, come share the word of God with me," even if they weren't particularly interested. There were very few times that we were harshly rejected. People were always open to at least hear what our message was, and even if they didn't particularly want to, you know, join the church or follow like what we believe, they're always very happy, very open, and they are just full of light. They're sweet people. The church has grown there so much because they've been prepared to receive the gospel, and they're really funny. They speak a Creole language. So they speak Portuguese, what they're taught in school, but then like their native language, they speak Creole, either Badio or Sampa Judu. And they always, they joke around a lot in that language, and they always tell little funny anecdotes, and the Creole was really fun. And you always hear them yelling it at each other in the street because they communicate in a very loud way. And so it's a place that it's very different being back in the States, especially in Utah, where it's really quiet here, especially in the evenings and things like that. They're Covenants, they do enjoy, you know, a good party once in a while, and they're always, you know, just happy. They do live hard lives in the sense that they really have to work just to have, you know, food on their table. But I was always surprised by how happy they were, even though they live in such humble circumstances, and often difficult circumstances with their families and just kind of like the social and political things that are happening there. They're very happy and they're very optimistic, and they're really an example. I realized that we have so much here, and I could definitely be more grateful and more hopeful after kind of seeing their example. So the population in Cabo Verde was created when Portugal colonized those islands, and they used it as a slave trade route. And so the people there are a mix between Europeans and then Africans. And there are some Europeans there now. They usually come as like tourists, or they have businesses there. And there are people who come from West Africa still. But the Cabo Verdeans are definitely different from those two parties. They're they're very humble people, like I said, but they're very prideful in the fact that they are Cabo Verdean. I had many discussions with Cabo Verdeans that distinctly said they were not African and they were not European. They're Cabo Verdean. And so they have a lot of pride for their country. And they recently gained independence in 1975. And so they're a very young country. They've only been independent from Portugal for a short time, but they have an interesting demographic as well. Depending on which island you are, people can have a different appearance. Some islands people have lighter skin, some islands have darker skin. You definitely see people with blue eye, hold on. You see a lot of Cabo Verdeans who can have green eyes or blue eyes. You can have blonde hair, you could have red hair, you could have black hair. They're a very colorful people. Which I was not expecting. I was always surprised at the diversity that there is, even though the islands are so small and have such a small population on them. There's no wildlife at all. Like sometimes I would be surprised when I would see birds. There's birds because there's no, like when I say that those islands are like arid and not inhabited. Before the Portuguese colonized, like there was literally nothing there at all. There's no snakes. There's no lions, no tigers, no giraffes. If there's monkeys, it's because someone brought them there. There's lots of cats and dogs and like farm animals because people like to domesticate those. You know, there'll be goats and chickens around a lot. But in terms of like wild animals, there's nothing. No scorpions. Scorpions? There's a little bit of bugs. Oh yeah, there's spiders. There's spiders in Cabo Verde that can be quite large depending on which island you're on. And different types. They're neat. There's really scary ones. You don't want them in your house, but there's centipedes and cockroaches and ants. So there's like bugs there, but like big wildlife, there's not any at all. I don't know quite how large they were, but I was always freaked out. I was not a fan of the centipedes. I could kill any other little creature that I saw, but if it was a centipede, I'd be yelling for my companion. They are, I don't know how poisonous they are. I think they really are more dangerous to, like the really young or the really old. So like missionaries were bit and they were fine. They maybe had like a sore or something, but yeah, you don't really have to be afraid of wildlife. Just sometimes the stray dogs. Their public transportation there is kind of interesting. Only in the capital do they have buses, and there's not very many. There's a lot of taxis, and then the most popular way of travel is in what they call a yas. It's actually a Toyota vehicle. It's like a big 15-passenger van, but I think that's a little bit of an understatement because they'll usually like paint it. They'll put big rims on it. They'll get it to be like real. I don't know how you could describe it. Just like real done up, and they'll have fun lights on there and loud music blasting out of the car, and that's the public transportation. So you can pay like $2 or $3 and they'll take you about 45 minutes away. It's like the distance of the trip or an hour, things like that. But they won't leave until the car is full, and by full I mean like way more than 15 people. They'll do laps around the city, and they'll have someone driving the car and they'll have someone like at the side of the car, and they'll be yelling the city they're going to go to. So they could be yelling like Asomada, Asomada, because that's a popular place that they would travel to. And so that anyone walking on the street who would know, oh, they're going to Asomada, they can like get in that car. But if you get in and there's only like 2 or 3 people in there, you could be like doing laps around the city for another half an hour or an hour. So you always want to try and get in a yacht that was really full, but the drivers are also very, very insistent on you getting in their car because they wanted people to get in so that they could fill it up and leave and have more time to do more trips. And yeah, they're always like, they know we're missionaries, so they're like, they'll yell, oh, I touched my mic, I'm sorry. They'll yell, sisters, sisters, and they'll try and get us to go in there because especially we'd be traveling in groups of 2 or 4, things like that. And yeah, very, very insistent. If you don't want to get in that yacht, you have to hold your ground and say, no, I'm not getting in. I'm going to a different location, things like that. So the yacht experiences were always great. And then usually packed in there, like I said, way more than 15 people, 20, 23. I had a lot of experiences like that. lot of times people will have goods with them, whether it's fruit or materials. Sometimes there'll be chickens. Sometimes you'll have a goat that's like stuffed under one of the seats. It's a little wild. It's pretty great. And then loud funana, which is like Cabo Verde music, just like blasting in their car. And so, yeah, yasas are fun. With clothing, my suggestion is just the simpler the better. The country that you're going to be in is really hot, and so you don't necessarily want to wear a lot of layers. Most of the clothing I took was just, simple cotton, things that are breathable, and you'll be proselyting and walking all the time. So you want to get a good pair of those like hiking sandals, and you'll want to bring a nice pair of flats as well, so you can use for zone conference, for church, things like that. Cabo Verde is relatively safe. It's one of the more stable like African countries, and you don't have very many problems with robberies, things like that. It's pretty rare when that happens. But I would also suggest just simplicity in what you're wearing. You obviously don't want to call attention away from the message that we have, and the people there, they do live very humble, very simple lives, and so I really enjoyed it there. Our appearance wasn't a big concern. They don't really care that much what you look like. Obviously, you want to be well presented as a representative of the Lord, but they didn't judge us on our appearance and things like that. And so I would just say don't stress about it too much. Just bring simpler things and things that are durable. You don't want to bring a whole lot of lace and things like that because if your power goes out, if your washer's not working, you're going to be washing your clothes by hand. And so I would say, bring things that are going to last a little bit longer. Yeah. For the sisters, and I think just for any missionaries going there, just follow the rules that the mission president gives you. They'll instruct you on how to use water filters there, because you do need to drink filtered water. They'll give you tips on how to clean your produce. You need to bleach it when you bring it home. You can't just, buy it at the store and like eat it. You have to clean it with bleach and things like that. And if you follow those tips, you won't get sick, or not very often at least. I would recommend to the sisters that you do, I took supplements of like calcium and like a multivitamin. I took things like that because sometimes the diet isn't very well rounded, especially some islands it's kind of hard to get produce, things like that on a regular basis. But yeah, the mission president's great. They'll give you lots of information about how to stay healthy and good things to eat, things like that. So I would just follow their advice, yeah. I would recommend that while you're there in Cabo Verde, that you are wise and that you're obedient. The mission president is inspired, and he sets the rules and the guidelines that he does for a reason. And probably the person you want to listen to the most, above all else, is the Holy Ghost. There were several instances on my mission where we were out proselyting, and at nighttime there, especially those last, maybe between 7:30 and 9 or 9:30, those last couple hours of your proselyting, it is pretty dark. They don't have a lot of street lights. People don't have porch lights. You might want to bring a little flashlight to proselyte with, but there were distinct impressions that we received, my companion, that, we shouldn't go down that street tonight. And it may be a street that we've walked down like 10 other times, but on that night at that time we both felt that we shouldn't walk there, and we didn't, and nothing happened. And so that's what's important, that nothing happened because we avoided whatever that situation was. But then there's also importance to listen to the Spirit and who you should talk to on the street. There were also lots of times where you just feel, I should go talk to that person right there. They look like they're having a bad day, and you can go and speak to them, and they'll open up to you, and you'll realize, they do have a need for the gospel, and you'll be able to help them. So listen to the Spirit while you're out there, and you'll be okay. So I actually refused to eat it. They were making it almost like a type of blood sausage with an cow intestine, and then they fill it with fat and with blood, and they call it chorizo. And you can buy chorizo, and it's healthy, but I refused to eat it, so I dodged that bullet. Walking home one night, I had just been transferred to another island, and it was literally my first night there. We were just walking by, and a Rottweiler jumped up and bit me. So that was a little crazy. Thankfully, it wasn't bad. There's no rabies in that country, so I basically, washed it, and it healed, so it was fine. But it was crazy for sure. people when you teach by the Spirit, that's an amazing feeling. That was probably, and hopefully it's happening a lot. And I had several experiences like that. But when you feel you feel the Spirit testify, the Holy Ghost testify through you, through the scriptures you're sharing or through the message you're sharing, it's powerful, and it's an amazing feeling. So, on my first day when I arrived in the island of Fogo, we were there visiting some members. And I was trying to be friendly, get to know people. And I meant to say, now I know where you live, but I said, now I know when you will die. And so they were kind of giving me a hard time about that. I learned the importance of the gospel, that when people, including myself, when we live those teachings, when we don't just go through the motions, but when you really live it and let the gospel of Jesus Christ change you, that's amazing. That's a real miracle. As a missionary, I learned to French braid my hair because we didn't have, straighteners and curlers and things like that. So you had about 3 options of how to do your hair. So I felt like that was a good skill that I earned. During the rainy season, it would just pour and pour all day long and be windy, and you would be walking down the street with an umbrella, and the wind would flip your umbrella inside out, and then you're getting soaked, and the taxi wouldn't stop because they wouldn't want you to get wet inside of their car, like get water inside of their car. And that happened on multiple times. So just the rain can be crazy. Honestly, one of the hardest things, it's more of on a spiritual note, but when you are teaching an investigator or you're helping someone who's not active in the church and they know that these things are true, but they still tell you that they're not going to do it when they make the choice. And you just know how much it could bless them, how much it could make them happy. And when they make that choice to not accept it, it's hard. It's heartbreaking. Set your standards. Decide to be an obedient missionary and start praying every day and reading scriptures every day and studying Preach My Gospel. Those are honestly, I think, some of the best things that you can do, because that's what you're going to be doing every day there. And so, yeah. Well, I just got home, so I feel like I could use some advice myself, but on the same page, that was one of my mission president's things, is he said, keep praying every day, keep reading your scriptures every day, keep attending the temple. And if you're doing those things, the Lord will keep guiding your life and helping you. From day one, love those people. The more you love them, the more willing you'll be able to serve them and help them grow in the gospel. Don't give importance or don't pay attention to the differences that you have in your lifestyles or your culture. Those will become a barrier if you do that. But just remember, they're children of God too, and they're easy to love. You'll see. You can easily meet a Cabo Verdean and become very good friends with them just after a short conversation. They're wonderful people. So yeah, just love the people you teach. So I know this is a really exciting time. You've got this fire to get out into the MTC and then eventually the mission field. And I would just say, keep that fire burning. You are still gonna, and confront challenges and difficulties that may even try and get you off of this course of going on a mission. But just really focus on your testimony and why you want to share the gospel. That is, I think, one of the most important things you could do before the mission. Realize that you are going to experience a lot of different things and have a lot of neat stories to tell, but really, ultimately, you're there to share the gospel. And so keep that as your focus, I think, would be something good to remember.
I was so pumped. I was on the airplane, and I didn't sleep much on the airplane because me and my companion sat by a Cabo Verdean, and he started asking us questions. And so we taught him the restoration, the plan of salvation. We taught him the standards, and we brought our testimonies on that entire flight. And I remember being super tired because we didn't get to sleep. But once the plane hit, I was so awake, so excited. And I remember walking out and we see our mission president and his wife and the APs, and I couldn't believe I was there. and then the drive over there. Yeah, we were 8 sisters and 4 elders, so we were a big group. And the car was exciting. We were all with our cameras, like taking pictures. And I've traveled to other countries before serving my mission, and so just from like far away, I thought to myself, "Oh wow, it looks like Mexico," or "It looks like Mexico City," and I was super excited. And I remember also we had like the introduction to the mission. We ate with our president, but then my first area was Asamada. So the mission office is in Praia, which is the capital, and Asamada, my first area, was about like an hour drive or an hour and a half drive from the capital, and it was inland because Praia is it's on the beach. And so I get my first companion. I'm all excited. She's all excited because it's the first time she's training. And that very night we were going to travel we were going to catch a bus. Oh no, we didn't. We had an elder missionary couple and drive us over there. But a lot of the other missionaries, they went to other islands, so they would stay with the missionaries for the time being until they got their flight to go to their area. But I went that very night. And so I was excited, and so was my companion. And while we were on the bus, she was just like talking to me, and she's all excited, and she's like telling me how it is. And I'm just like, oh, I'm dying. I'm so dead, and I cannot keep my eyes open. But then the very next morning, we go out and we opened an area. And we were the first sister missionaries, I think, in a couple of years. There were only elders, and so we were the first sisters there. And so we met up with the elders and some members, and they showed us around. And I thought I learned pretty good Portuguese when I was in the MTC, since I know Spanish, but I didn't realize that Portuguese isn't really spoken out on the streets. If you speak Portuguese to somebody, they'll most likely speak Portuguese back if they know it pretty well, but everything you hear is Creole. And so all the members I met, everybody, they would speak to me, and I was just looking at my companion. I didn't know what they were saying, and she would have to like help me translate, and she would like calm me down. She's like, "Don't worry, like you'll get the hang of it. You'll learn it. Just be worried on your Portuguese. Just speak Portuguese. Don't worry about the Creole." And that's what I was like for the first like week, 2 weeks. My companion helped me a lot, so I could understand the culture better, because it's a lot different than here. And so she would like give me a few tips here and there, or this is what this means if they're saying this to you, or this is how you say hi to somebody. Like we would say hi by giving like kisses, like on both sides. And so she warned me about that, like beforehand, before going out. She said, "This is how you're going to say hi to the women, so don't worry." And yeah, that was my first week. Praia, it is the capital, so there is a lot of people. And compared to the other areas that I was in, Praia was huge. And there's a lot of missionaries, and our areas they're not that very big, because you just walk everywhere. And if you want to get somewhere a little bit further away, you could take a taxi or a bus. But the people there are very open and very friendly. You walk down the street, and wherever you are in Praia, there's just a lot of people everywhere. And you hear music all the time, coming from different little tiny like markets, and from like little tiny restaurants all over the place. So there's always just a lot of noise, and the people there are they're friendly, they're outgoing, they are Catholic, right? And so one of their traditions is that when they're in mourning, like when somebody dies, they wear all black, like the family. everything they wear is black, and they will go for like, depending on where you are in the family, like if you're just a relative or you actually are like the family, like spouses will wear 2 years all black for 2 years, or the kids will go a year, and maybe like cousins will go like 6 months, stuff like that. But that was something, that was a tradition, a big one on that island, especially, and especially in Praia, compared to other areas or other islands. I didn't see it as much. And so you always know who was in mourning because they were wearing black, and you could go up and you could talk to them. And it was easy to talk to them about like the plan of salvation because they just lost somebody. And so that was a tradition. And in Praia also, I think, I would say it's a fact. People there know how to read. Especially the older people, the older generation. For example, like if I lived there, my mother, she would barely know how to read, right? But like in the other areas, but in Praia, the older generations have more education and they understand Portuguese more than in other areas, and they know how to read. So they understand you if you give them like the scriptures, they get it. And that to me was interesting because my first area, I didn't get that a lot. Like older people knowing how to read. But being in Praia, I didn't have to worry about it so much. The women, they sell, a lot of the women, they sell fruit or produce like out on the street, or fish. And a lot of the men work in construction. A lot of the men also are taxi drivers. And on Saturdays and Sundays, you will see all the women washing their clothes, and they will outside of their houses or up on their roofs. And it's really easy to make conversation with them or to help them because they're washing their clothes, and it's not easy. They put all of their clothes in like this big, how would I say it? It's not like a bucket, but it's just like a really big bowl. It's just like huge, and it's plastic. And then they have this, how would you say it?
A washboard?
Yeah, they had like a washboard, and it had like ridges. And so they would have like a bar of soap, and they would just like get their clothes wet and just rub the bar of soap on their clothes and just like bater roupa. That's how they say it. And so on the weekend, that's what the women would do. They would wash all of their clothes, and you would just see the clothes all lined up out on the street everywhere you went. Just the clothes right outside there. And sometimes you would see like the women also like washing their dishes outside. They spent the most of their time outside of their homes. And so you would see that a lot. In Praia, you would also see them killing animals, getting slaughtered on the street. So don't be shocked by that. If you see that, it is normal. Them killing pigs or sometimes cows. Sometimes you would see a herd. Is that what it's called? A herd of just like cows crossing the street on some of like the little suburbs. You would see like the shepherds, like with their goats, like out on the streets, taking them out. And that's like the capital. And you'll see chickens running around sometimes. And the little kids are always outside on the street as well, all the time, and they're the cutest. And like I said, they're open, and so they always say hi to you when you walk down the street. Bon dia, and they kind of know who you are because it's a tiny country and the church is pretty big there. So people are calling you out all the time. I served in Asamada, and it's on like the main island. I served in Praia, in an area called Mont Vermelho. And then I served in Santa Maria on the island of Sal. It's a touristy town. And then I served just for 2 weeks on the island of Santo Antão in Porto Novo. And then I served in Cova Figueira, which is like the inland part of the island of Fogo, where the volcano is. And I served back in Praia, in another area called Tira Chapéu. Their traditional food, everywhere you are, is cachupa. And it is this stew with like beans and vegetables and I think another grain that's like common over there. But they put it, the way the people would explain it to me, they would put it in a big pot. And it wasn't on the stove. It was with like firewood. Is that how you say it? And so it was like in their yard. And they just have like big stones and like firewood underneath. And it would be in the pot like all day, almost. And the women, every once in a while, they go check on it. They like bend over and they like blow on it, and to get it going. But it is their traditional food. And to me at first, I thought it was pretty bland. When I first got there, I thought everything was a little bland. And I felt everything needed a little bit of salt. And my companion told me, I think it's because you were raised, in a Hispanic culture and they use a lot of like flavors but you'll get used to it and you'll like it. And I did. I fell in love with the food. After a few weeks, my favorite plate was caldo de peixe. And when I would tell members that, when they would ask me, what's your favorite food here? I would say caldo de peixe. Or to translate, it would be like fish soup, not soup, fish soup. And it was delicious. It would have like fish, either like chunks of tuna or I don't know what other fish they used. And it would have green bananas, like super, super green bananas put in there, and potatoes, and a little bit of like red tomato paste. And it was delicious with like a side of rice. I loved it. And everybody would be so amazed when I would say caldo de peixe. Because they would say, well, sister, that's like a poor man's plate. And I would say, that's my favorite plate. I love caldo de peixe. And that's really common there. The other food there that's super delicious is camoca. And especially camoca from Fogo, from the island of Fogo. That is the best camoca you will ever get. And it's made from corn. And a lot of people will say that it tastes like burnt popcorn. A lot of the missionaries would say that. They would say, how could you like that? It tastes like burnt popcorn. And I would say, no, you have to know how to eat it right. And then you'll fall in love with it. And so I think, I saw them do it one time. It's in this it's made out of stone. And they would put their corn in there. And it had like a little, how would you say it? How do you call that? Like a little...
It's like a mortar and pestle. It's like a baking time smash it.
Yeah. And they would just like grind up the corn. I don't know if the corn was grilled, if it was just like raw. I'm not sure. But it's like this brown powder. And the people there would have it with milk. And we would have it with powdered whole milk. Because the people there wouldn't really buy like milk from like the carton or anything. It was powdered milk. And that's how I tried it with one of my companions, and I loved it. So powdered milk, camoca, a few scoops of powdered milk, a few scoops of camoca, and sugar. And you put water and you just mix it all together and you drink it. And it was the best. And the people there would always say that camoca is super good for you, that it makes you smarter, it'll help you in school, it gives you energy. And I just love to drink it. I would drink it all the time. Breakfast, lunch, and when I would come home, just make myself a cup of camoca. And it was delicious like that. some sisters or some Cabo Verdeans would just have it just like the powder with just sugar, and like the powdered milk, like without any water, just dry. That's how some would like to eat it as well. And what else about the food? Mango season is amazing. Mango season is not it's not so long. It's just like, I think a month and a half, maybe like 2 months. But you would get the mangoes, and when there was like plenty of them, oh, it was so cheap too. And they were just so juicy. You just like bite into it, and it would just like run down like your arm. It was absolutely delicious. I loved it. Another typical food there is couscous. And it's like a very dense cornbread. It's not so sweet. I didn't find it so sweet. But I loved it. I would have to say it's pretty plain, but it's delicious. And everybody, all the missionaries, they just end up falling in love with couscous, especially when it's like warm, when it's just like barely made, and they would put like butter on it and serve it to you. And I know that others would put like vary their couscous. I tried one with cinnamon, and that was my favorite one. And so that's a typical food there as well. They eat a lot of fish, like grilled fish, and they eat a lot of feijoada as well, which is just like beans with peppers, onions, and carrots, and you just put it all in a saucepan with a little bit of olive oil and a cube of, what's it called, like chicken stew that they would put in there. And so that was feijoada, and I loved that as well. It was delicious. The little markets would sell juices, but you didn't really see them. At least we're like the families of people we taught. We usually didn't teach high class people. They usually, their middle class was, pretty. The standards weren't so very good, but they would drink Pepsi and Coke. A lot of times we were deceived because they would bring out a juice and they would offer it to us, and we wouldn't drink the water. But if it was in a bottle, like store-bought, we would drink that because it was a lot safer. But we had to be really careful in looking at the bottles because sometimes they reuse their bottles, their Coke bottles or their Fanta bottles. So they're bringing out to you, and they just call everything sumo or juice, even like soda. They'll just say juice. And so they would offer it to us, and so we always had to like make sure that it was like the actual thing and it wasn't just another juice that they would put in. A lot of their juices, they would just use just like the juice packets. They would sell those everywhere in every loja or market. Because that's what the women usually use. So, yeah, the Portuguese in Cape Verde is different than Brazil, and I think from Portugal, it is more like Portugal, but it's not. Personally, I feel like Portugal. It's very like nasally, and I didn't think the Cape Verdeans spoke like that. I found their Portuguese similar more to the Portuguese of Angola. Or Mozambique. I thought those were more similar than, say, like Cabo Verde with like Portugal. That's my opinion about that. For example, the S's are different. And the way, like the S at the end of words would be a sh instead of s. And so, like in Brazil, in the Brazilian accent, they would, for example, say mais tarde. And in Cape Verde, it was just mais tarde. And so, like the E's at the end of words, you wouldn't really pronounce those E's at the end of them. And yeah, their Creole was in there as well. The younger generations, so for example, like teenagers, their Portuguese was usually very well spoken. I could understand them, and I wouldn't pick up Creole in their Portuguese. But like the older generations, they would put in like their Creole as well. They did their best to speak Portuguese to us. And so it was mixed in with Creole. And with others, they wouldn't speak Portuguese at all. It would just be Creole. And every once in a while, they would try to make sure if we were understanding, you know. They would just like look at us and we'd be like, oh no, yeah, we understand. Like, go on, it's okay. It's not so crazy over there. It's pretty simple. So to me, the craziest thing I had was eel, fried eel. And it was on the island of Fogo in Cova Figueira. Cova Figueira, it's like right alongside the volcano. So you look one way, you see the volcano. You look the other way, you see the ocean. And Cova Figueira, it's almost like on a cliff almost. So there's like a little trail that goes straight to the ocean. So there's lots of seafood there. And we were offered a lot of fried eel. And I loved it. It was so good. And I think that was the craziest food I had. Like I said, it's very simple, you know, not much. It's when you're teaching with your companion and what your companion says, it is exactly what you are thinking. Or the scripture that you share is exactly the scripture that your companion is thinking about sharing. And one of the cool experiences with the Spirit that I had was you really don't, we try to figure out like what's going to happen with people, you know, like of course you plan for them and you want to get them to a certain point at a certain time, but sometimes the Lord, like he has his own time. And just one experience was I was with a companion in Mount Vermelho, and we went to go teach this couple. They were living together. They'd been taught a lot by previous sister missionaries, and they always seemed to get real close, and then, you know, they would like sway. But it was who was it? Yolando and Dudu. And his name was Yolando, and he was a policeman. And he was more interested than his girlfriend was. Even though all of her family were members, and she was the only one that was not baptized. But we go to his house, and we're teaching him. We're teaching him, and he just... The lesson didn't go, I guess, in my perspective, it didn't go as well. But we left him a chapter. We felt impressed to leave him with a chapter. I think it was Mosiah 18. And so we left him with that chapter. And we left, and I remember during the week we didn't know what to do. Should we go back? Should we not? And we had marked with him, and we went by, and he wasn't home. And neither was Dudu, the wife. And so we thought, okay, we were about like to give up on them because they weren't progressing. But after 2 weeks, a lesson fell, and we thought, you know, let's go see if they're home. So we go home. So we go to his house, their house, and we teach Yolando, and he's super anxious, like to get the lesson started. He just says, "Well, are we going to sing? Are we going to pray?" "Oh yeah, let's sing." And we pray, and we asked him, "So how was reading the Book of Mormon?" And he looks down his Book of Mormon, he looks up at us, and he's smiling, and he says, "I just wanted to know if this chapter was meant to change my mind about getting baptized." And we thought, I don't know, we just felt impressed to leave it with the chapter, but what did you think of it? And he said, "I really like the chapter, and I really want to join this church. Like, I know one day I'm going to get baptized." And everything he was saying, we were amazed because we were not expecting it. I mean, the last lesson, we just left the chapter, you know, because we just felt, this is a good chapter to read. I think it'll be good for you. But it really changed him. And just seeing how happy he was, and he was excited. And after that, we saw him in church with his entire family. They were all there. And I left the area, and I'm not exactly sure what if they continued. I think they kept going a few more times. I'm not sure if I don't think they ever got baptized, but I know it was just one more step for them. And that is what I loved. And that's when I felt the Spirit the strongest.
Awesome.
The greatest life lesson I think I learned on the mission was how big obedience is. Just being obedient and the blessings it brings. And I think when I went on the mission, I didn't really understand. I had a testimony, but while I was out on the mission, I realized how small that testimony was. I don't think when I went out there, I didn't quite understand why we did everything we did, all the commandments we had, because our investigators would ask us that. Well, why do I have to? And a lot of times I was, let me get to you on that in a little bit. But I realized just obedience, if we don't understand why we are obeying, keep obeying, and that understanding will come. And then you will get a testimony out of that certain commandment or out of that certain principle. And so just coming back from the mission, it's now I have to live everything I taught, right? And so I still see it like when we are obedient, we receive blessings, we understand better what we're being taught at church and from the scriptures. So
Awesome.
I think just talking to people, you just had to come out of your shell, whether you liked it or not. And I remember at first I was, well, I don't know what to say. My companion would just say, go, just go talk to that person. And I did the same to others. And so just starting conversation with anybody. And if you kept, it takes some practice, but it was really easy. And sharing the gospel, of course, it's a lot easier now. I was lucky because almost throughout my entire mission, I served in the cooler areas of the mission. I mean, it was still hot, but I didn't suffer like some sisters did. But the rainy season, oh, that was crazy. Oh man, the rainy season was something. The wind blowing, and there's no way to not get wet. I mean, you have an umbrella, but as it rains, there's wind, and so you get wet no matter what. And I remember getting worried about my scriptures getting wet, and so we would put it in a bag. And I was in Asamada, my first area, and it rained so much that no matter that my scriptures were in a bag, they still got wet because it was that bad, the rain. And in Cape Verde, there's no, what's it called, like a draining system. So when it rains, just like little streams, little rivers, just like on the streets. And I always had to be careful that I didn't have any like open wounds if I was walking out in the rain. Because if you had an open wound, you walked out in the rain and in the big puddles, then you got infected. And so that was crazy weather. The hardest part was when you're in an area and you feel that nobody is listening to you or nobody wants to hear, or the investigators aren't doing what you're asking them, and some know that it will help them and they don't do it. That was hard. But also sometimes the hard part was just to continue and being strong. Like there were some times where you feel like you just want to give up, and then you need help to understand that you're there for the Lord. And I remember I was in a certain area and it was really rough. But my mission president, in an interview, he asked me, "Why are you out here?" And I started naming, I want to be here to be an example to my younger brothers, my family, because I know it would be good for me. And he looked at me, he said, "No, sister, why are you here?" And, I heard the voice, "Because I want you to be here." And that helped a lot. When you're feeling down and everything, everything's going to be okay. You just keep praying and knowing that, these people will change. No matter if right now it seems like the way they're living, they will never change. If you keep having faith in them and you know that you're there for the Lord and that you're an instrument in the Lord's hands, that helped me a lot. It is hot. It is very hot, so be prepared to sweat a lot. Maybe take a sweat rag and you keep in your bags. You could wipe your face during lessons, because I did that. I had a little sweat rag. And also just knowing your scriptures. I think one thing that I regret is being in seminary and not memorizing all of the scripture masteries, or memorizing them and then not going back to them. Memorize the scripture masteries, like have them there, and start reading Preach My Gospel like right now. Be familiar with it, especially lesson number 3. And or chapter 3 with all the lessons. Be familiar with that. And what else? Somebody who's barely going out there. Wear good shoes. Please buy good shoes. Sisters and elders, wear good shoes, because it's all cobblestone. And in some areas, you will be hiking up to get to somebody's house. Just like dirt path. And so just be prepared for that. And I hope you know how to cook, because your members don't feed you and you eat in your apartment every day. So sometimes you have certain expectations when you come home, and sometimes it's not that. So be patient with your family, and keep reading your scriptures every day, and keep going to the temple, and plan your days. My mission president told me, plan out your days. And when I got home, that's what I started doing. Like, at first I started doing it on my phone. That didn't really work out. So I had to go and actually get a planner and write it out. Just like what you want to accomplish in the day or in the week. And just make goals, just like you do on the mission. And I feel like that helps you keep busy. And so you don't have just time to just sit around. Because I felt when I got home, I was so excited, there's so much to do. I need to catch up on some things, but really you have no desire. I had no desire to watch TV or movies or anything. I had the desire to just go out and teach with the sister missionaries, or I told them, elders, if there's any family that you're out teaching and you need my help, I'm here. Or if you need a place to teach, I'm here. That's how I was. But just plan and stay busy, and it's okay. You will adjust eventually. It's okay.